The wind screamed outside, rattling the broken windows of Ryan's shelter. Snowflakes slipped through the cracks, melting into tiny streams across the warped wooden floor. Ryan sat near the fire, sharpening the edge of his knife, his eyes hollow with the kind of loneliness that only years of isolation could carve. When the knock came, it startled him. A soft, hesitant thud. Then another. Ryan froze. Nobody knocked anymore. In this ruined, frozen world, there were no neighbors, no friends, no travelers. His hand tightened on the knife as he stood. Slowly, he pushed the door open against the howl of the storm. There, in the swirling snow, was a figure. A woman, no, not entirely human. She swayed on her feet, her body trembling from the cold, her lips pale, her strange violet eyes glowing faintly even in the darkness. Her voice was a whisper, fragile as ice. Please, let me in. Just for tonight." Ryan's grip on the knife tightened. His instinct screamed danger. But then she stumbled forward, and before he could stop himself, he caught her. She was freezing. Her skin felt like brittle glass. "Who are you?" Ryan growled. "The Lyra," she whispered. "I can cook. I can clean. I'll work. Just, please don't let me die in the cold." Ryan hesitated, jaw clenched. Then, cursing under his breath, he dragged her inside and slammed the door against the storm. By the fire, the Lyra sat wrapped in one of his blankets, her hands trembling as they clutched a steaming mug of water. She drank slowly, as though each sip was the most precious thing in the world. Ryan stood across the room, arms folded, knife still in hand. His eyes never left her. "You're not from here." Her lips curved faintly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "No, my home is gone. My people scattered. I've walked for days. I thought the storm would take me." Ryan snorted. "Maybe it should have." She flinched at his words, her eyes dropping to the fire. But she didn't argue. She only whispered, "Thank you for letting me stay." Ryan looked away. "Don't thank me. You'll be gone in the morning." The first night passed in silence. She curled near the fire, too weak to move, while Ryan pretended not to notice how small and fragile she looked in his blanket. In the morning, when he woke, she was already moving about. "What are you doing?" he barked. The Lyra turned, holding a pot over the fire. "You had a little rice. I thought, maybe I could make it better for you. It's the least I can do." Ryan scowled. "I didn't ask you to." Her voice was soft. "I know, but I want to." For the next 2 days, she stayed. Ryan didn't chase her out into the storm, but he didn't welcome her either. When she swept the dusty floor, he muttered, "You're wasting your energy." When she patched the torn blanket, he said, "It won't last long anyway." When she placed food before him, he grunted, "I could have done that myself." And every time, the Lyra only smiled faintly, as though his sharp words couldn't cut her. "Maybe so," she would say gently. "But now you don't have to." On the third night, Ryan caught her shivering. The fire had burned low, and she sat hugging her knees, her violet eyes reflecting the dying flames. Without thinking, Ryan threw another log onto the fire. Her eyes lifted to him. "You don't have to. Just stay warm," he cut her off gruffly. "I don't need a corpse in my house." But her gaze lingered on him, soft, grateful, and something inside Ryan twisted. The days dragged on. Slowly, almost against his will, Ryan found himself watching her. The way she hummed softly while cleaning, a tune that didn't belong to Earth. The way she smiled when she placed food in front of him, even when she barely ate herself. One evening, as snow pounded against the roof, the Lyra sat by the fire, sewing the sleeve of his torn jacket with thread she had salvaged. "Why?" Ryan asked suddenly. She looked up, puzzled. "Why what? Why bother with all this? You don't know me. You owe me nothing." For a moment, her hands stilled. Then she whispered, "Because I know what it feels like to be alone." The words hit him harder than the storm outside. He stared at her, at the soft sadness in her eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. That night, as she curled near the fire, the Lyra whispered into the silence, "Ryan, If you want me gone tomorrow, I'll go. But these last few days, I've felt alive again. And that's because of you." Ryan turned away, pretending her words didn't matter. But long after she had fallen asleep, he lay awake, listening to her soft breathing and wondering why his chest felt so heavy. For the first time in years, he realized he didn't feel quite so alone. The cabin was quieter than usual that morning. Outside, the snowstorm had softened into a gentle curtain of white, falling endlessly over the trees. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Ryan rubbed his hands together and sat at the edge of the table. His eyes were still tired, his expression guarded. Across the room, the Lyra quietly arranged a small bundle of food she had cooked, some bread, broth, and dried meat she had warmed carefully over the fire. "Here," she said softly, placing the bowl near him. Her voice was cautious, almost afraid of breaking the silence. Ryan didn't look at her at first. He muttered, "You don't have to do this every morning." The Lyra clasped her hands together, her head tilted slightly. "I know, but I want to. You gave me shelter. It's only right that I take care of the little things." For a moment, Ryan didn't respond. He only stared at the food, the steam curling into the air. Then, finally, he sighed. "You're not a servant. You don't owe me anything." Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Maybe, but kindness doesn't have to be owed." Ryan's eyes flicked to hers for a second before looking away again. That softness in her voice, he didn't know how to handle it. He had spent years alone, walls built high around his heart. And yet, this alien girl, fragile and persistent, was somehow slipping through the cracks. Later that day, Ryan busied himself outside, chopping wood. The cold bit at his skin, and the axe slammed against the frozen log with dull thuds. Every strike echoed his inner conflict. From the doorway, the Lyra stood wrapped in a blanket, watching quietly. After a few minutes, she walked down the small steps and into the snow, her bare feet crunching softly against the ice. "You'll tire yourself out," she said gently. Ryan didn't look at her. "I can manage." "I didn't say you couldn't." She stepped closer, tilting her head at the log. "But even strength needs rest." He froze, the axe hovering midair. Slowly, he lowered it, his breath fogging in the frigid air. "You shouldn't be out here. It's too cold." The Lyra smiled faintly, tugging the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I've endured colder nights than this. At least now, I'm not alone." Those words struck him. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. He only grunted and returned to chopping, though his swings lacked their earlier force. That evening, the two of them sat by the fire. Ryan kept his distance, seated on the far side of the room, sharpening his knife. The Lyra sat cross-legged near the flames, warming her hands. After a long silence, she whispered, "You still don't trust me, do you?" Ryan's hand froze on the blade. His jaw clenched. "Trust is earned. And I don't even know who you really are." She lowered her eyes. "I'm just someone who didn't want to die in the cold." Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. "I didn't come here to harm you. I only needed a place to feel safe." Ryan looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days. Her golden eyes shimmered in the firelight, not with deceit, but with an aching loneliness that mirrored his own. He exhaled slowly. "You remind me too much of things I've lost." The Lyra blinked. "Is that why you pushed me away?" He said nothing. She rose, her blanket sliding down her shoulders, and moved a little closer. "I'm not asking for your heart, Ryan. Only your kindness. Just let me exist here without feeling unwanted." Her voice was so fragile, so raw, that something inside him cracked. He stared into the fire, his voice rough. "You're not unwanted." The silence that followed was heavy, but it carried warmth. The next morning, Ryan awoke to find the cabin tidier than he had left it. The tools were neatly stacked, the floor swept, and the smell of warm stew filled the air. The Lyra was humming softly as she stirred the pot. For the first time, he didn't feel the weight of her presence as a burden. Instead, he found himself watching her movements, graceful and deliberate, her long hair falling over her shoulders as she worked. You didn't have to do all this, he muttered, stepping closer. She glanced at him, her smile faint but real. I know, but I wanted to. Isn't that enough? Ryan hesitated. Then, quietly, he said, It's more than enough. The Lyra's eyes widened slightly at his words. She held his gaze for a heartbeat longer than before, and in that small space of silence, something unspoken passed between them. That night, the storm returned, fiercer than before. The wind howled against the cabin walls, snow piling high outside. Inside, the fire blazed bright, but the chill still seeped in. The Lyra wrapped herself in the blanket and sat close to the hearth, shivering. Ryan noticed, his brow furrowing. You're freezing, he said. She nodded slightly, trying to hide her trembling hands. It's fine. I'll manage. Ryan muttered something under his breath, then pulled another blanket from the shelf. Without a word, he walked over and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him in surprise. Ryan, don't argue, he said quickly, his voice gruff. Just stay warm. The Lyra's eyes softened. She clutched the blanket to her chest, whispering, Thank you. For the first time, Ryan didn't pull away from her gratitude. He only sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The firelight danced between them, and for a long time, neither spoke. But in the quiet, something had changed. The wind outside howled like a starving beast, clawing at the wooden cabin with icy fingers. Snow piled higher against the windows with every passing hour, and the night sky had vanished beneath a veil of endless white. Inside, the small fire burned stubbornly, the only barrier between warmth and the merciless cold of the world beyond. Ryan sat near the hearth, shoulders hunched, his eyes lost in the flames. He had spent the past 4 nights pretending not to care, pretending she was just another burden, another stranger who had stumbled into his life. But each night the silence grew heavier, and each day her quiet endurance gnawed at him. The Lyra sat opposite him, curled beneath a blanket that barely covered her long, slender frame. Her alien skin shimmered faintly in the firelight, the natural patterns along her collarbones glowing like faint silver veins whenever the flames flared. She hugged her knees to her chest, watching him with eyes too large, too sorrowful for words. He had ignored her offers, the way she tried to help with food, the way she wanted to tidy his already bare cabin, the way she kept promising she would repay him if he only let her stay. He had turned away, told himself it was safer not to get involved. But tonight, as the storm screamed against the walls, he could no longer deny the truth. She wasn't a stranger anymore. She was a fragile life depending on him. Ryan. Her voice was soft, barely audible over the crackle of the fire. It wasn't the first time she had spoken his name, but tonight it carried something heavier. Are you angry with me? For being here? He blinked, the words piercing through his thoughts. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, with a sigh, he rubbed his hands across his tired face. No, he said finally, his voice rough. I'm angry at myself. For letting this happen. For not knowing what the hell I'm supposed to do with you. Her gaze lowered, hurt flickering across her delicate features. If I'm a burden, I can leave when the storm ends. I don't want you to suffer because of me. Something inside him twisted. She wasn't demanding, she wasn't complaining, she was offering to walk back into the freezing wilderness rather than cause him pain. The image of her collapsing in the snow, alone, haunted him so fiercely that his chest tightened. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes locked on hers. Don't ever say that again. You step out there, you won't last an hour. I can't. I won't let that happen. Her breath caught. For the first time, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Then, you do care. The words unsettled him, not because they weren't true, but because of how true they were. He had tried so hard to resist it, to keep the wall up. But every time he looked at her, at the way she shivered quietly through the nights, the way she tried to hide her fear, something inside him softened. Silence stretched between them again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It carried weight, a gentle tension that pulled them closer even as they stayed apart. The fire cracked, throwing sparks into the dim room. Ryan noticed how pale her lips were, how her hands trembled despite the blanket. Without thinking, he grabbed another fur from the chair beside him and crossed the small distance. "Here," he muttered, draping it gently around her shoulders. His fingers brushed against her skin, warm and strangely silken, like nothing he had ever touched before. The Lyra inhaled sharply, her eyes widening at the contact. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she whispered, "Thank you, Ryan." Her voice carried such sincerity, such gratitude, that he felt heat rising to his cheeks despite the cold. He sat beside her now, closer than before. Too close. The firelight painted her features in gold and shadow, and he realized just how beautiful she was. Not in the obvious, human way, but in something deeper, something unearthly yet heartbreakingly vulnerable. "You shouldn't keep sitting so far away," she murmured after a while, her head tilting toward the fire. "Heat is shared. That's how my people survive the cold."